The moment my sister said she hoped my baby wouldn't turn out like me, alone, unloved, and poor, I thought that was the worst thing I'd hear at my own baby shower. I was wrong. What happened next changed everything, and I mean everything, about how I saw my family, my worth, and my future. My name is Aria, and 7 months ago, I was just another struggling single mom-to-be, working double shifts at the grocery store, living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped studio apartment. The father of my baby, Wade, had walked out when I was 4 months pregnant, choosing my former best friend over me and our unborn child. I felt like damaged goods, like maybe everyone in my family was right about me always making the wrong choices. But this story isn't about Wade or even about me being a single mom. This is about the day I discovered that sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones destroying you, and sometimes strangers become the family you never knew you needed. My sister Kira has always been the golden child. While I struggled through school with undiagnosed learning disabilities, she was getting straight A's and scholarship offers. When I was bouncing between dead-end jobs, she landed a marketing position at a Fortune 500 company. When I was dating guys who treated me like garbage, she was engaged to her college sweetheart. My dad, Frank, made it clear from day one who his favorite was, and it wasn't me. My Aunt Nora, my mom's sister, was different though. She's a registered nurse who actually seemed to care about me, not just judge me. When she offered to throw me a baby shower, I almost said no. I knew it would be awkward with my family, knew there would be tension, but I also knew this might be the only celebration my baby would get. Grandma Beth, my 70-year-old grandmother, insisted on coming despite being in a wheelchair since her stroke last year. She always had a soft spot for me, maybe because she saw something of my late mother in me. My mom died when I was 16, and I think that's when everything started falling apart for me. She was the buffer between me and the rest of the family's disappointment. The baby shower was set for a Sunday afternoon at Aunt Nora's house. I spent the morning throwing up from morning sickness and trying to squeeze into the only decent maternity dress I owned, which I'd borrowed from a coworker. I looked at myself in the mirror and tried to practice smiling, tried to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, this could actually be a good day. Maybe my family would step up. Maybe they'd see that I was trying to turn my life around. I should have known better. Some families lift you up when you're down. Others use your lowest moments to remind you exactly where they think you belong. Walking into Aunt Nora's house that Sunday afternoon, I felt like I was entering enemy territory disguised as a celebration. The living room had been transformed with soft yellow and green decorations, balloons tied to every chair, and a banner that read, "Welcome Baby" in cheerful pastel letters. It should have felt warm and inviting, but all I could think about was how out of place I looked in my borrowed dress, how my swollen feet were already aching in the only decent shoes I owned. Aunt Nora greeted me at the door with a genuine hug, the kind that actually meant something. She'd been working a double shift at the hospital the night before, but still managed to make everything look perfect. The gift table was already half full, and I recognized some faces from my work at the grocery store, mixed in with neighbors and distant relatives I hadn't seen in months. Kira arrived 20 minutes late naturally, making her entrance in a designer dress that probably cost more than I made in 2 weeks. She air-kissed my cheek and handed me a perfectly wrapped gift with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Sorry I'm late," she said, though she didn't sound sorry at all. Traffic was horrible coming from the country club. Of course it was the country club. Kira made sure everyone knew she belonged to places like that now, places where people like me couldn't even afford to park in the lot. Dad showed up with Grandma Beth, wheeling her to the best spot in the living room where she could see everything. He gave me an awkward side hug and a pat on the shoulder that felt more like a consolation prize than affection. "How are you holding up, kiddo?" he asked, but his eyes were already scanning the room for someone more interesting to talk to. The first hour went exactly like I expected. I sat in the designated chair of honor, opening gifts while everyone watched and made appropriate noises. Diapers, baby clothes, a high chair from Aunt Nora that was way too generous. Each gift came with advice I didn't ask for and comments that felt like tiny cuts. "Make sure you start a college fund early," said Mrs. Patterson from next door, as if I had money lying around to invest. "It's never too early to think about the baby's future." "Sleep when the baby sleeps," added my coworker Janet. Though I guess you'll have to work around your job schedule. Every comment reminded me of what I didn't have, what I couldn't provide, what I was lacking as a soon-to-be mother. I kept my smile plastered on and nodded at all the right moments, but inside I was shrinking smaller and smaller. Kira spent most of the time on her phone, occasionally looking up to make observations that weren't quite insults but weren't compliments either. When I opened a package of generic brand baby formula, she said, "Oh, good. You'll definitely need that since you won't be able to afford the organic stuff." When someone gave me a secondhand car seat, she added, "At least it's functional, right?" Each comment was delivered with that same fake smile, that tone that made it impossible to call her out without looking oversensitive. This was Kira's specialty, the art of the socially acceptable put down. Dad was equally unhelpful, spending most of his time talking to other guests about work, the weather, anything except his pregnant daughter, who was supposed to be the guest of honor. When people asked him about becoming a grandfather, he'd shrug and say things like, "Well, we'll see how it goes," as if my pregnancy was some kind of experiment that might not work out. The only person who seemed genuinely happy for me was Grandma Beth. She held my hand during the gift opening and whispered little encouragements. "That's a beautiful outfit," she'd say about each tiny piece of baby clothing. "Your little one is going to be so loved." She was the only one who talked about my baby like they were already real, already part of the family, already deserving of love and excitement. But even Grandma Beth couldn't change the overall atmosphere in that room. I could feel the judgment radiating from certain corners, hear the whispered conversations that stopped when I looked over. This was supposed to be my day, my celebration, but it felt more like a charity event where everyone was doing their good deed for the poor, unfortunate relative. By the time we got to the advice-giving portion of the shower, I was emotionally drained. My back ached from sitting in the same position, my feet were swollen beyond recognition, and I had a headache from forcing smiles for 3 hours straight. But I knew the worst was yet to come. I could see it in Kira's eyes, the way she was building up to something, waiting for her moment to deliver whatever cutting remark she'd been saving up. I just had no idea how devastating it would actually be. The advice-giving game started innocently enough. Aunt Nora had prepared little cards for everyone to write down their wisdom for the new mom. But some guests wanted to share theirs out loud. Mrs. Patterson went first with generic advice about sleeping schedules. Janet from work talked about the importance of asking for help, though she looked directly at Dad when she said it, which made him shift uncomfortably in his seat. But I could feel Kira getting restless beside me. She kept checking her phone and sighing dramatically like she was being held hostage at her own sister's baby shower. When Aunt Nora asked if anyone else wanted to share advice, Kira's hand shot up immediately. "Oh, I have something to say," she announced, standing up with that practiced smile she used at work presentations. The room went quiet, everyone turning to look at her. I should have known right then that whatever was coming wouldn't be good. Kira never volunteered to speak unless she had an audience and something devastating to deliver. "I've been thinking about this a lot," she began, her voice taking on that fake sweet tone that made my stomach clench. "About what kind of advice to give my big sister." She paused, looking around the room to make sure she had everyone's attention. And I realized that the most honest thing I could say is this. My heart started pounding. Something in her tone, in the way she was building up to this moment, set off every alarm bell in my head. "I hope this baby doesn't turn out like you, Aria. Alone, unloved, and poor." The words hit me like a physical blow. The room went completely silent. I heard someone gasp, maybe Aunt Nora, but the sound seemed to come from very far away. My face burned with humiliation as every person in that room stared at me, waiting to see how I would react to being publicly destroyed by my own sister. But Kira wasn't done. She was still standing there with that horrible smile, like she'd just delivered a thoughtful piece of wisdom instead of a calculated attack designed to humiliate me in front of everyone I knew. "I mean, let's be realistic here," she continued, her voice getting stronger as she saw the shock on everyone's faces. "We all know Aria's track record with relationships and money management. I just think it would be tragic if this innocent baby ended up following the same pattern." I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking as I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process what was happening. This was my baby shower, my celebration, and my own sister had just used it as an opportunity to list all my failures in front of everyone. Then Dad started laughing. Not a surprise laugh or an uncomfortable chuckle, but actual laughter, like Kira had just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. The sound cut through me worse than anything Kira had said. Just like her mother, he added, still chuckling, and those 4 words destroyed whatever was left of my composure. My mother. My dead mother who had struggled with depression after Dad's constant criticism. My mother who had worked 3 jobs to make ends meet because Dad spent his paycheck at the bar. My mother who had died feeling like a failure because people like him convinced her she was one. The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. I could see Aunt Nora's face turning red with anger, could hear Grandma Beth making little sounds of distress. Some of the guests were looking at their hands. Others were staring at me with pity that made everything worse. But all I could focus on was the burning shame flooding through my entire body. Every insecurity I'd ever had about becoming a mother, every fear about not being good enough, every worry about raising a child alone came crashing down on me at once. This was my family. These were the people who were supposed to support me, encourage me, help me believe I could do this. And instead, they had just confirmed every terrible thing I'd ever thought about myself in front of a room full of people. I looked at Kira, still standing there looking pleased with herself, and I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. She didn't accidentally say cruel things. She didn't make thoughtless comments in moments of stress. She deliberately, carefully chose to hurt me whenever she got the chance, and she enjoyed it. This wasn't sisterly rivalry or family dysfunction. This was cruelty, pure and simple, delivered by someone who was supposed to love me unconditionally. My baby kicked hard against my ribs, as if responding to my emotional distress, and that tiny movement reminded me of something important. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was protecting my child, and I would not let them grow up thinking this kind of treatment was normal or acceptable. The silence in the room stretched on, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Something shifted inside me when I felt my baby kick. It was like a wake-up call, a reminder that I wasn't just sitting there as Arya, the family disappointment anymore. I was about to be someone's mother, and that someone deserved better than watching their mom get torn apart by people who were supposed to love her. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky, but my resolve getting stronger with each second. The room was still dead silent, everyone frozen in that horrible moment after Kira's attack and Dad's cruel laughter. My borrowed maternity dress felt tight across my belly, but I straightened my shoulders and looked directly at my sister. "You know what, Kira?" My voice came out quieter than I intended, but it was steady. "You're absolutely right about some things." I could see surprise flicker across her face. She'd expected me to cry, to run away, to crumble under the weight of her words like I always had before. But something was different this time. Maybe it was pregnancy hormones, maybe it was finally hitting rock bottom, or maybe it was just that I was tired of being everyone's punching bag. "I am alone right now," I continued, my voice getting stronger. "And I don't have much money. You got those facts completely right." I took a step closer to her, watching her confident smirk start to fade. "But you're wrong about the most important thing." The entire room was holding its breath. I could see Aunt Nora leaning forward in her chair, Grandma Beth gripping her wheelchair handles, even the neighbors who barely knew me waiting to hear what I would say next. "I'm not unloved," I said, and the words felt like a revelation even to me. "And neither will my baby be. Because love isn't about having money or a perfect relationship status or impressing people at country clubs. Real love is about showing up for people, supporting them when they're struggling, celebrating their victories instead of tearing them down." I looked around the room at the faces staring back at me. And you know what I've learned today? Some of the people in this room have shown me more genuine love and support in 3 hours than my own family has shown me in 28 years. Kira's mouth opened like she was going to interrupt, but I wasn't finished. "I've spent my whole life apologizing for not being you, Kira, for not getting straight A's, for not landing the perfect job, for not having the perfect boyfriend. I've let Dad make me feel like I was some kind of consolation prize daughter, always falling short of what you achieved." My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through. "But you know what? At least when I fail, I failed trying to build something, not trying to destroy someone else. Dad started to say something, probably another cutting remark, but I turned to face him directly. And Dad, bringing up Mom right now? Really? I shook my head, feeling a surge of anger that surprised me with its intensity. Mom struggled because people like you made her feel like she was never good enough. She worked herself to death, trying to prove her worth to people who were determined to find her lacking. I will not let you do that to me anymore, and I sure as hell won't let you do it to my child. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of Aunt Nora's grandfather clock. Some of the guests looked uncomfortable, like they wanted to leave but didn't know how. Others, like Janet from work, were nodding slightly, like they were proud of me for finally standing up for myself. I walked over to the gift table and started gathering the presents, my hands shaking, but my movements determined. Thank you to everyone who came today and brought gifts for my baby. Your generosity means more than you know. I looked pointedly at Kira and Dad. And to those of you who came here to make me feel small, mission accomplished. But this is the last time. Grandma Beth wheeled herself closer to me, reaching out to touch my arm. Don't you dare let them chase you away from your own celebration, honey, she whispered, her voice fierce despite her frail appearance. This is your day and your baby's day. Her words almost broke my resolve. I wanted to sit back down to pretend everything was fine, to go back to being the family scapegoat because at least that was familiar. But then I felt another strong kick from my baby, and I remembered what I was really fighting for. I was about to become someone's whole world. This baby would look to me for protection, for love, for an example of how to treat people and how to expect to be treated. I could not let my child grow up thinking that Kira's cruelty and Dad's dismissiveness were normal family dynamics. I picked up my purse, preparing to leave my own baby shower with whatever dignity I had left. That's when the front door opened. Aunt Nora walked through the front door still wearing her navy blue scrubs, looking exhausted from what I knew had been a brutal 12-hour shift at the hospital. She was carrying a manila envelope and had that serious expression she got when dealing with medical emergencies. The entire room turned to look at her, probably grateful for any distraction from the toxic family drama that had just exploded. Sorry I'm late getting back, she said, glancing around at all the shocked faces. I had to stay for an emergency surgery, but I'm glad I caught everyone before you left. Her eyes found mine across the room, and I could see something in her expression that I couldn't quite read. Actually, Arya, I have something important to announce. My stomach dropped. The last thing I needed right now was more bad news, and Aunt Nora's tone suggested this was serious. I was still holding my purse, still ready to walk out and never look back, but something in her voice made me freeze. I got a call from the hospital about an hour ago, she continued, walking closer to where I stood. Remember that blood test you took last month? The genetic screening for the baby? I nodded, confused about where this was going. Every pregnant woman gets those tests. Yeah, everything came back normal. Well, they ran some additional tests because of certain markers they found, and they discovered something incredible. Aunt Nora's tired face was starting to show the hint of a smile. Arya, you're a perfect bone marrow match for a 7-year-old girl named Ivy Chen, who's been on the transplant waiting list for over 2 years. The room went completely silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Not the horrified quiet after Kira's attack, but the stunned silence of people trying to process unexpected news. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What does that mean? Aunt Nora opened the manila envelope and pulled out several official-looking documents. It means you have the power to save a little girl's life. But that's not all. She looked directly at me, and now I could see that she was actually excited. Ivy's family, the Chens, they've been searching for a compatible donor for so long that they established a foundation to support potential donors. Arya, they want to cover all your medical expenses for the donation procedure, set up a full college trust fund for your baby, and they're offering you a position at their family's accounting firm. I felt like I was dreaming. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like me. That's impossible, I managed to say. There's more, Aunt Nora continued, her smile growing wider. I spoke with Mrs. Chen personally. She said anyone selfless enough to help save their daughter's life deserves to be surrounded by people who appreciate them. They want you to be part of their family's life, Arya. They want to support you not just through the donation process, but beyond that. I heard Kira make a small choking sound behind me. When I turned to look at her, her face had gone from smug satisfaction to complete shock. Her mouth was actually hanging open. "That's not possible," Kira said, her voice higher than usual. "Things like that just don't happen. There has to be some mistake." But Aunt Nora was shaking her head, holding up the official hospital letterhead. "No mistake. The blood work is definitive. Arya is a perfect match, and the Chen family has been praying for exactly this moment for 2 years." Dad looked like someone had slapped him. He kept opening and closing his mouth, clearly trying to process how his failure daughter had just become someone's literal lifesaver. Mrs. Patterson from next door started crying. "Oh, honey, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Janet from work was beaming like she'd won the lottery herself. "Arya, this is incredible. You're going to save a little girl's life." But the most amazing transformation was happening in me. Standing there in that room where I'd been humiliated just minutes before, holding papers that proved I was valuable in ways I'd never imagined, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt proud of myself. "The procedure is completely safe for you and the baby," Aunt Nora assured me, "and the Chens understand you're pregnant. They're actually even more grateful because they know you're taking on additional consideration for their daughter while carrying your own child." I looked around the room at all the faces staring at me with newfound respect and amazement. These same people who had just witnessed my sister tear me down were now seeing me elevated to something I'd never been before. A hero. Kira was still standing there looking stunned, but now her expression had shifted from shock to something that looked uncomfortably like jealousy. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd just finished telling everyone how worthless I was, and now I was literally worth saving someone's life. The transformation in that room was immediate and complete. Suddenly, everyone who had been sitting in uncomfortable silence just minutes before was crowding around me, wanting to congratulate me, to touch my arm, to be part of this incredible moment. Mrs. Patterson was still crying, saying over and over how proud she was to know me. Janet grabbed my hands and said this was the most amazing thing that had ever happened to anyone she knew. But the most satisfying moment was watching Kira try to backtrack from her devastating comment. She approached me with a forced smile, her voice shaky as she said, "I was just joking earlier, you know that, right? I didn't mean any of it." I looked at her for a long moment, remembering every cruel comment, every put-down, every time she'd made me feel small. "No, Kira," I said calmly. "You meant every word, and that's exactly why this means so much." Dad was shuffling his feet nearby, clearly struggling with how to handle this reversal. The daughter he'd just laughed at for being a failure was now going to save a child's life and receive opportunities he'd never been able to provide. "Arya, I think maybe I spoke out of turn earlier," he mumbled. "You think?" Grandma Beth's voice cut through his weak apology like a knife. Despite being in a wheelchair, she managed to look fierce and formidable. "Frank, you should be ashamed of yourself. Both of you should be." She looked at Kira with disgust. "This girl has more heart in her little finger than either of you have in your whole bodies." The next few hours flew by in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Aunt Nora helped me contact the Chen family, and I found myself talking to Mrs. Chen, who cried when she heard I was willing to help. Her gratitude was overwhelming, but what struck me most was how she kept thanking me for my beautiful heart and saying that Ivy was going to be so excited to meet the person who saved her life. Within a week, everything changed. The Chen family didn't just offer me a job, they welcomed me into their lives like I'd always belonged there. Mr. Chen personally drove me to every medical appointment, making sure I understood each step of the donation process. Mrs. Chen started bringing me homemade soup and asking about my pregnancy like she was a concerned aunt. The donation procedure went perfectly. When I met 7-year-old Ivy for the first time, she hugged me and said, "Thank you for giving me your bone marrow so I can grow up." I cried harder than I had in years, but these were tears of joy, of purpose, of finally understanding what it felt like to matter to someone. 3 months later, I gave birth to my daughter Jade in a private room that the Chens had upgraded for me. Ivy, now healthy and gaining strength every day, was one of my first visitors. She brought a teddy bear for Jade and a card that said, "Thank you for saving my life so I could meet your baby." The job at Chen and Associates turned out to be everything I'd never dared to dream of. They started me in accounts receivable, but encouraged me to take accounting classes at night, which they paid for. For the first time in my life, I had colleagues who respected my work, who saw potential in me, who treated me like I belonged. Kira tried to rebuild our relationship, sending cards and making awkward phone calls where she claimed she'd just been having a bad day at the baby shower. But I'd learned something important about forgiveness. You can forgive someone without allowing them to keep hurting you. I was polite but distant, protecting the peace I'd finally found. Dad made more effort showing up for Jade's first birthday and actually seeming proud when he told people about how I'd saved a little girl's life. But the damage was done. Some words can't be taken back, and some moments reveal too much truth about who people really are. The best part of this whole story isn't even the money or the job, though those things changed my life in practical ways. The best part is that Jade is growing up surrounded by people who celebrate her, who see her as a blessing, who would never dream of tearing her down to build themselves up. She calls the Chens her bonus grandparents, and Ivy is like the little sister she never would have had otherwise. That baby shower taught me that sometimes the worst moments in your life are actually doorways to the best ones. Sometimes you have to lose the family you were born into to find the family you were meant to have. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by the people who refuse to see it. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances and new beginnings. And subscribe to this channel for more real stories about overcoming family drama and finding your true value. Your support means everything, and I'll see you in the next video.